Wonderful. So, bonjour à toutes et à tous, et bienvenue à notre rassemblement d'aujourd'hui. Very warm welcome to everyone joining us once again. It's always energizing to see our community come together, and I want to recognize those joining us for the first time. Whether you've been part of CAM since the very beginning, or you're joining us for the first time this quarter, we are grateful to have you here. Now, we've got a full agenda ahead today, but before diving into today's updates, let us begin with a quick pulse check to bring some energy into our chat. So, as winter approaches and many of us are preparing for the year-end travel, we know that flying across Canada in the winter season can bring its own magic. So, our check-in question for this morning is, which Canadian airport gives you the most memorable winter experience? Whether it's that snowfall on arrival, a sunrise departure, or a view that stays with you long after the flight. Take a moment and share your answer into the chat, and we can get warmed up in the room and spark some connection across our ecosystem. Wonderful. That's a great one, Daniel. Yeah, Winnipeg at winter is a classic prairie arrival. Yep, Priya flying into Vancouver on a clear winter morning is always breathtaking. And I see that too, Louis. Yeah, Yellowknife in the winter is unforgettable there. Wonderful. So thanks so much for those responses. Let's dive in. So as a reminder, this town hall is your central touch point for Canada's latest developments in advanced air mobility operations, regulatory progress, and national coordination. It's where industry, government, and airports, as well as our innovators, come together to move this work forward collectively. And in a year marked by global acceleration in zero-emission flight, emerging regulatory milestones, and shifting political landscapes, these updates you will hear today from CAM, Transport Canada, and NAV Canada are more important than ever. So let's get into it. We want to respectfully acknowledge, as always, that today's digital gathering takes place on the unceded and traditional territories of many First Nations across Turtle Island, now known as Canada. In that spirit, we're continuing to be proud to spotlight the powerful work of Kuteen Creations and the Bead Your Province Map project, an initiative that celebrates both Indigenous identity, art, and place through beaded designs representing provinces and territories across Turtle Island. We encourage you to explore this and support this vibrant expression of Indigenous culture and creativity. So as for initial introductions, my name is J.R. Hammond. I'm privileged to serve as the Executive Director for Canadian Advanced Air Mobility, Canada's Federal Industry Association for AAM. In collaboration with our co-founders at the National Research Council of Canada, and supported today by our CAM team of David Dong and Theo Robson, we're excited to welcome you back to our Q4 Town Hall. Each CAM Town Hall is designed to offer those key insights from Canada's leading federal authorities as we collectively accelerate towards operationalization. For today's agenda, we'll begin with an update from CAM, highlighting our role in building a consistent space to tackle the challenges and drive regulatory progress towards AAM operations in Canada. Next, we will be then welcoming Jatinder Sahota, who will be sharing an overview of Transport Canada's RPAS Security program. Then we'll slide over to Alan Chapman and Patrick Annetts from NAV Canada to provide some of the key quarterly updates from our national ANSP. Now, as a kind reminder for our audience engagement throughout today's events, we encourage you to submit your questions using the Q&A function in Microsoft Teams. Our CAM team will follow up offline on any detailed insights or questions that we don't have the chance to address live in today's session. So with that, let's kick things off by turning to some of the key updates from CAM. So starting off again, as the global conversation evolves, so does our approach at the organization. Our international partners and we at CAM are aligning more closely with the evolving definition of advanced air mobility currently being shaped by ICAO. So what does AAM mean for us? At CAM, advanced air mobility comes to that evolution of air transportation driven by an ecosystem that is brought together through new propulsion systems, our electric, hybrid, and hydrogen technologies, new aircraft architecture with designs optimized for various ranges, and new operating missions redefining how people, goods, and services move both through our urban and regional environments. Now, importantly, regardless of the definition, the goal is clear: to make air mobility safer, more sustainable, and more accessible for our communities across Canada and around the world. Now, advanced air mobility encompasses this evolving aviation ecosystem, as shown here by one of our slides. We take all of the work coming out of the RPAS and drone sector, shown here by one of the examples of Indra Robotics, which had some of their commercial operations start back in 2016. We then focus on all of the work coming out of the retrofitting of existing aircraft, such as Harbour Air's electric e-breather that began its its testing flights back in 2019. We then progress to the aviation training sector for all of the future pilots required in this industry. We look to the examples such as Sealand Flight's Pipistrel Velis Electro that had its first commercial flight back in June of 2024. For some of our future technology, the expanding electric conventional takeoff and landing, or the eCTOL, of the Beta ALIA CX300 is one of the examples that we help support. This aircraft here is where we're helping to push for an expedited certification process in Canada by the 2028 timeframe. We then have to look at the important developments of one of Canada's leading eVTOL OEMs, Horizon Aircraft, with their hybrid Cavorite X7, targeting some of that 2030 plus timeframe for operations. And then, of course, the developments of future autonomous aircraft, such as the Wisk Gen 6 aircraft. Wisk is looking for a later entry into the Canadian marketplace, given the progression of autonomy and our regulatory frameworks, but still an important operating pillar for our aviation ecosystem. And lastly, it is critical for us to ensure that our commercial aviation partners in Canada, the Air Canadas, WestJets, and Porters of the world, are at the table and pulling upon these new energy systems like hydrogen for applications seen through previous work under the Airbus Zero E program. We know these are longer timeframes, but of course, important operating pillars under that evolving aviation ecosystem. And as we stitch this together, the important piece is that no singular aircraft will serve all mission and operating cases across Canada. And CAAM is working under that advanced air mobility umbrella to ensure that the Canadian ecosystem is prepared and ready for the diversity of these operations to come. Now, we need to make sure that Canada's role in AAM is strongly represented in the leading or international organizations helping to shape the sector. At the same time, we are working across the Canadian aerospace ecosystem with our international, federal, provincial, and municipal partners to ensure that AAM is both accessible and relevant to them and their members. Every part of the ecosystem has a critical role to play in building this future, and CAAM is here to connect those voices, align those priorities, and make sure Canada is not only keeping pace, but leading in this global transformation. And before we dive into our content for today, I want to take that moment to frame what we mean when we speak about the CAAM ecosystem. We divide our ecosystem into the following main tiers. We're led by our national board at the highest level, supported by our advisory committee, guided from our project partners, our engaged members, and of course, our greater general ecosystem to continue to build that momentum towards this new industry. And since day one, CAAM has been focused on building this pan-Canadian network that brings together the full spectrum of players needed to operationalize advanced air mobility in the country. But more than just a network, we've created a tiered engagement model, one that reflects the depth of time and financial commitment across our members and enables every partner to contribute in a way that aligns best with their role, resources, and critically, their readiness. We're proud to showcase this structure today and to highlight some of the members who are bringing this ecosystem to life. Now, in regards to our national authorities, CAAM is privileged to help drive the coordination between Transport Canada, NAV CANADA, and the broader AAM industry through the National AAM Integration Team. Our role is simple. we need to convene and unify voices from across Canada and beyond, bringing industry opportunities, concerns, and challenges directly to our regulatory authorities. By working alongside our National Board and Advisory Committee, we ensure that the industry's inputs actively shapes Canada's pathway towards operations. And now a completely relevant topic as for this last quarter, Canada's 2025 budget has sent a clear signal that our country intends to remain competitive in this global landscape rapidly shifting towards clean aviation and advanced technologies. With new investments coming from innovation, skills, and zero-emission transportation, the budget strengthens the foundation needed for aviation and AAM to scale safely and responsibly. For our sector, this means stronger pathways for research, clearer support for regulatory modernization, and new opportunities for Canadian companies to lead in electric and hydrogen aircraft development. Together, these measures position Canada to accelerate our economic growth while advancing a cleaner, more connected national air transportation system. Budget 2025 gives us renewed momentum, but budgets alone do not shape that path forward. What truly drives the progress is how we communicate our priorities to the federal government. Now, more relevant than ever, we're talking about the federal engagement process, and specifically how the voice of CAAM members reach decision makers at the national level. So our biannual federal engagement letter captures these latest opportunities and challenges facing the AAM sector and provides clear recommendations to federal leaders shaping the future of this space. These letters are shared directly with the Minister of Transport Canada's office, the Ministry of Industry at ICAO's office, and the Transport Canada and NAV CANADA AAM integration team. It continues to be a key channel for influence, ensuring the perspectives of Canadian innovators, airports, and operators are at the national conversation where AAM advances the most. Now, as we look beyond Canada's borders, our momentum is not only national, it is global. This brings us to an important milestone that strengthens Canada's position on the world stage. Earlier this quarter, Canada and CAAM formalized a landmark MOU with the Korean Aerospace Industries Association and G3AM, creating a shared commitment to advance zero-emission aviation between our countries. This partnership marks a major step in aligning international standards, accelerating clean aircraft development, and critically, opening new opportunities for investment into and for Canadian companies in one of the fastest growing AAM regions of the world. While international partnerships are accelerating our global momentum, we also saw a milestone here in Canada that signals how quickly zero-emission aviation is becoming real. Beta Technologies' ALIA CX300 completed its first electric aircraft arrival into Vancouver International Airport, the first time this aircraft flew into Western Canada. This is a major step towards our electric aviation goals, moving it from concept to real operations in our skies. With Helijet preparing to integrate electric aircraft into their passenger, cargo, and healthcare missions, this milestone shows that zero-emission aviation is no longer theoretical. It's happening here. It supports real communities, and it's going to continue to position Canada as a leader in the shift to clean regional flight. As electric aviation advances in our skies, we also saw a regulatory milestone on the RPAS side that sets the stage for real operational progress in 2026. Transport Canada released its updated RPAS regulations that came into effect, unlocking medium-sized drone operations and lower-risk BVLOS flight without the need for an SFOC in certain cases. This is a major shift because it moves Canada from a case-by-case approval side into that more effectively rule-based system. This update gives Canadian operators a predictable path to scale, strengthens the safety oversight, and accelerates the integration of RPAS as a core part of Canada's future AAM ecosystem. Now, as we transition to the importance of work across our country, our digital quarterly region meetings are where we zoom in from the national picture and focus on what is actually happening on the ground in each region of Canada. Complementary to our digital town hall, which is a federal and national conversation, These sessions spotlight local champions, real projects, and regional opportunities. So if you want the tangible updates and a chance to be seen and heard in your region, this is your next event to be at. We'll make sure that our CAAM team provides some of the registration links for the next upcoming events available in the chat and, of course, in the summary email thereafter. Next, Canadian OEM and CAAM project partner Horizon Aircraft was awarded a $2 million INSAT grant to accelerate Project Crystal, a greater $10.5 million effort to develop an all-weather eVTOL propulsion system capable of flying in conditions where most helicopters cannot. This is a big deal because it moves Canada closer towards fielding one of the world's first eVTOL aircraft certified for flight into known icing, unlocking safer year-round operations for missions like medevac, disaster response, and of course, northern connectivity. With Horizon, 3C, and the University of Toronto working together on this project, this investment signals that Canada is backing real technologies that can transform how our people and critical goods move across our challenging Canadian operating environments. As Canada's AAM ecosystem continues to grow at home, we also had a major global moment where CAAM represented our country on one of the world's biggest aviation stages. CAAM had the honor of representing the country at the Dubai Airshow by moderating the international panel on rethinking airports for scalable AAM infrastructure, sharing the stage with some of our aviation leaders from Saudi Arabia, Italy, and the US. We position Canada as the global voice on the future of airport transformation, vertiport integration, and of course, the pathway to operations. This matters because it puts Canada's expertise, Canadian companies, and Canadian priorities at the center of a global conversation on how AAM will scale. In addition, CAAM also had the privilege of leading our national AAM investment delegation to Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, bringing Canadian innovators directly into conversations with the region's top aviation regulators, airports, airlines, and investment authorities. Over 6 days, our delegation met with the Qatar Civil Aviation Authority, Qatar Airways and Hamad International Airport, Abu Dhabi Airports, Etihad Airways, and the Canadian embassies in both Doha and Abu Dhabi, among many others. This trip mattered because it opened concrete pathways for Canadian companies to access new investment, explore demonstration projects, and build those partnerships in one of the fastest growing aviation markets in the world. It also positioned Canada as a trusted partner in the global shift toward electric, hydrogen, and digitally enabled aviation. The message from the region was clear. They want Canadian expertise, Canadian technology, and Canadian leadership at the table as they build the next generation of air mobility. And to conclude with our international updates, CAAM is proud to announce that in December of 2026, next year, we will be leading the Canadian delegation to the ICAO Advanced Air Mobility Symposium to be hosted in Bangkok, Thailand. This global gathering will build upon our inaugural support of the ICAO AAM Symposium that occurred in Montreal last year. By coordinating Canada's presence across our regulators, airports, and industry, we will ensure that Canada's priorities and innovation help shape the global framework that will govern safe and scalable AAM operations worldwide. A kind reminder that the CAAM members, part of the delegation, will be able to have the eligibility to receive up to 50% of their travel costs covered during participation and, of course, convening in Thailand next year. So we know the road to operationalization won't be easy for this industry. We know we still have significant challenges that lie ahead, and they will require that resilience, adaptability, and clear focus on scaling from our entry into service towards full-scale operations, all while meeting the evolving regulatory standards and aligning market expectations. But the urgency to chart this path has never been clearer. That's why CAAM is committed to building a robust, coordinated Canadian AAM ecosystem, one actively progressing towards safe, scalable operations. So let us be your trusted partner in navigating the complexities of Canadian AAM and, of course, our AAM journey across the world. So with that, we'll conclude the formal CAAM updates on our industry side for this quarter, and we're excited to transition towards our Transport Canada segment, where we will welcome Jatinder Sahota, who will be leading and sharing an overview of Transport Canada's RPAS security program. So with that, we'll welcome Jatinder up to the stage. Jatinder, we are grateful to have you here and of course showcase some of Transport Canada's developments. So thank you once again, and we have the stage for yourself.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to move over my presentation. Is that good? Everybody can see that? Okay. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. My name is Jatinder Sahota. I'm the policy advisor on the RPAS security team at Transport Canada Civil Aviation. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. Right, so this is a great platform for us to share and provide an overview of Transport Canada's drone security program. So what I'll do is I'll provide insights into the drone landscape, the threat, our mandate, the makeup of the drone security program, delve a little bit into the counter-drone technology and approvals, and then the way forward for AAM Security, and then we'll leave some time for questions. So just go on.
Jatinder, just double checking. Can we just make sure you've got your slides? I don't see it shared on our side. Apologies there.
Oh, you don't see it shared? Sorry, 1 second. If this still not sharing. How's that? Is that coming up now?
All good on that side. Excellent.
Sorry, apologies for that. Okay, let me just on that. Okay, so sorry, let me just click back on this. So apologies again. So when I'm giving a presentation about RPAS or drones, I like to start with a quick review of the definitions so we're all on the same page. Terms like RPAS, drone, UAVs, UAS are often used interchangeably. So for this presentation, I'll just use drones. And to all the drone experts and pilots joining us today, apologies, you've probably heard these definitions 100 times. So think of this as your annual refresher course on the house. So RPAS is the official government term used in Canada. RPA stands for remotely piloted aircraft, navigable aircraft of any size or design, and are controlled remotely by a human operator with no pilot on board. RPAS refers to the system which includes everything needed to fly the aircraft, the control station, and command and control links. So the control station, as you all know, is a handheld device with control sticks and used to operate and monitor the aircraft. I'm just going to go to the next slide. So, so the drone landscape. So as you are well aware, drone technology is advancing at a rapid pace and is transforming, revolutionizing how transportation and industry sectors work and operate. Drones used to be big, complicated, difficult to operate, and hard to obtain. This is not the case anymore. They are cheap, easy to acquire, and simple to use. The capabilities just keep advancing, and drones are getting smaller, lighter, and more efficient and sophisticated. Now everybody can have a drone, whether it's military, private citizens, hobbyists. We are now finding drones everywhere. Drones are making a significant difference across all sectors and are allowing us to connect to remote communities easier, assisting in research and rescue operations, wildlife monitoring, roof inspections. So what I'd like to share, recently I came across a fascinating example from an article the other day, which involves researchers using drones to study endangered North Atlantic right whales. So what they're doing is they're attaching, and you see the picture right here on the corner, they're attaching petri dishes to drones and flying them over drones to collect breath samples. So using drones makes the process safer, faster, easier, and far less invasive. Before this, researchers had to be on boats, reaching out with long poles, holding petri dishes, which definitely is more challenging, stressful for both the whales and the scientists. So there's a whole suite of operations now undertaken and performed by drones and are having a major positive impact on our daily lives. So I'm just going to go to the next slide. So now, with all the wonderful things that drones can do, there is also the negative threats and risks that drones pose. Malicious actors are using drones for unlawful purposes. We've seen a huge increase in sort of criminal activity at our prisons in Canada, the smuggling of weapons, drugs into prisons, careless, clueless drone operators flying into major events. We've seen this in the NFL in the US. We've seen this at soccer games across Europe and the globe. And more recently in Canada at the Blue Jays World Series games, where we issued several administrative monetary penalties for regulatory violations. So in addition to this, you've all seen on the news across Europe, several major airports in Denmark, Germany, Belgium, Spain have faced operational shutdowns due to reported sightings in controlled airspace. These incidents have caused significant flight disruptions and raised concerns about aviation safety and airspace security. So I'm just going to go to the next slide. So how is Transport Canada addressing this? Oops, I think it's me. So our role, Transport Canada's role is to protect the safety and security of the national transportation system, providing regulatory oversight of Canadian airspace. So Budget 2023 provided TC and the RCMP funding over 3 years to start the development of a national drone security and counter-drone program. So initially, when we started out, our focus was safeguarding Canada's major airports. However, we've seen a rise in drone activity in critical infrastructure sites, and major events are increasingly seeking support to address risks in the airspace around their facilities. As a result, our scope has broadened. So our drone security program is built around 3 core pillars. So the first one is prevention, preparedness, and response. So what I'll do is I'll go into each one of these pillars and describe the key initiatives that we undertake to address the drone security challenge in Canada. So the first pillar is prevention. So this is where we aim to stay ahead of the emerging risks. Prevention involves building strong situational awareness, strengthening the knowledge of drone rules, and creating meaningful deterrents that reduce the likelihood of malicious and clueless drone activity. So this includes enhancing public and industry awareness of drone rules and what is a drone risk or threat, supporting the development of advanced detection technologies and research to understand evolving drone capabilities. Further to this, implementation of drone airspace restrictions where there is a justified need and a critical threat or vulnerability, and also working with sort of critical structure owners and operators for them to implement site hardening measures. So effective prevention not only protects lives and infrastructure, it also reduces operational disruptions and financial losses. So you'll see over here on the ongoing initiatives on the right, we do have a drone detection pilot project that's ongoing right now at one of the port authorities in Canada, where there's 2 aspects to this. We're assessing the detection technology and also collecting data for further analysis on that. And we're also working with Correctional Services Canada in sort of a mitigation project to assess the technology for that aspect. So moving on, I'm just going to switch to the next slide. So now we have our second pillar, which is preparedness. So preparedness focuses on ensuring all partners are ready to act quickly, safely, and in a coordinated way. To do this, we are working closely with key stakeholders. This includes airports, critical infrastructure owners, the RCMP, and other federal partners to enhance readiness. And our preparation efforts include creating sort of drone incident response protocols for our Class 1 and Class 2 airports, ensuring that personal airports understand their roles, responsibilities, and escalation steps when the drone threat or incident emerges. So we're conducting tabletop exercises, simulations, and live testing to validate plans and identify gaps. Again, we've also visited several of the Class 1 and Class 2 airports to conduct vulnerability and risk assessments for these sites. And so together, these activities build on a collective resilience and ensure that if and when a drone incident happens, partners can respond rapidly and effectively. So I'll move on to the next and final pillar of our sort of drone security. So the third pillar is response. So when a drone incident occurs, response capabilities must be immediate, proportionate, and well coordinated. So key components of our response pillar include sort of working with the RCMP to further enhance their capacity to respond effectively to a drone incident. So as part of Transport Canada, we have a drone enforcement program where we delegate law enforcement agencies across Canada to enforce Part 9 of the Canadian aviation regulations. We currently have 18 partnerships with law enforcement. We're looking to expand this. In addition, we're supporting the deployment of authorized detection and mitigation technologies where they are legally permitted. So in closing, the drone security program provides a clear and collaborative framework for addressing drone threats in Canada. So what I want to emphasize is through strong prevention, enhanced preparedness, and effective response capabilities, we are building a modern, adaptive, and resilient approach to drone security in Canada. So I'm just going to go on to the next slide. So countering drones. So to address the threat of drones, a new industry has emerged with companies developing and selling counter-drone technology. So for Transport Canada, I said, so this is a pressing concern as we want to ensure that the safe and responsible use of these technologies in the Canadian airspace. So counter-drone technologies include detection and mitigation. Detection systems are designed to track and identify drones over a designated area. Mitigation systems include radio frequency jamming, and kinetic means include nets, lasers, and drone on drone. So what I just want to go to is the next slide, and this is sort of approvals. So in Canada, we have two acts that govern the use of counter-drone technologies. Firstly, it's the Aeronautics Act. So under this act, you can't engage in any behavior that endangers the safety and security of an aircraft or crew members. So you can't use any electronic or kinetic means to interfere with an aircraft. It is completely prohibited. So what we're trying to do is we are amending the Aeronautics Act to modernize it to clearly indicate that interference with a drone is prohibited unless it is authorized by the Minister of Transport to safely and securely for safety and security and for the protection of the public. So under the Radio Communication Act, which is the responsibility of ICED, any use of electronic equipment that interferes or jams with radio communications is legal and prohibited. ICED is currently only allowing limited agencies such as D&D, RCMP, CAF, and the Correctional Services of Canada to use electronic jamming for the purpose of safety and national security purposes. So for detection systems, ICED requires any entity to use to have a license to use those. And I'll just move on to the next slide. What I want to emphasize on this slide is that our work includes partnerships with the RCMP, ICED, and ourselves. And I want to underscore that this work can't be done in isolation. Ongoing collaboration remains central to refining our approach, testing solution in real-world environments, and ensuring that Canada's aviation, critical infrastructures, and major events and the public remain protected as the drone landscape continues to evolve. So this brings me to sort of the final slide. So I just want to relate it back to AAM. So AAM brings new exciting opportunities, but it also introduces emerging security risks to the aviation system, critical infrastructure, and the public. So we at Transport Canada are committed to supporting an innovative and modern aviation system that safely and securely integrates AAM operations. So to do this effectively, we need greater understanding of the associated security challenges. This will allow us to identify gaps and inform future policy, regulatory, and operational approaches. So that concludes my presentation, and we can leave it open to any questions. Thank you.
Powerful. So Jatinder, thank you for just slowing us down and showcasing some of the insights coming from our federal authority on these challenges. I think it just goes to the entire ecosystem here as well. We're entering a new unprecedented area where those security challenges of those three pillars will continue to be a main focus. When you look external to Canada, is there another international jurisdiction that is doing this well and succeeding that we can take and apply here in Canada, or are there examples still to be determined?
So what we're doing, we are looking at international practices. We're working with sort of Five Eyes across and see what they're doing in terms of their security challenges. We're sort of all in the same boat. We're looking at the technologies, detection, mitigation. Yeah, we're working together, learning from them, and we'll integrate our approaches similar to our like-minded partners moving forward.
And you spoke extensively about the interdepartmental collaboration. Who else needs to be at the table? We know some of these future technologies are still developing, but you've got a great base. Who's going to be those future pieces coming to the conversation there?
So it's all the innovatives, and I'd like to highlight there was a sandbox in Ottawa last week. DIDC held that where they invited a cross section of innovators to come to showcase the detection technologies, how they're performing, and I think that one was the first one that was done in an urban setting. So there is a report coming out, I believe shortly. You can find it on the DIDC website that showcases those technologies. So this is an evolving space. We need to learn more about the technologies, the capabilities. Again, there's not one silver bullet in terms of the technology detection. They're not 100% effective, both on the mitigation side and the detection side. So again, we're monitoring, we're learning, and we're looking to sort of industry to advance and help us out on the side of detection and mitigation.
And we know that the great results coming out of that Ottawa program, of course, are still being published, but we're excited to see more. And we know this conversation, Jatinder, is only going to expand in that advanced air mobility piece as these technologies continue to have a greater role. We see our dual purpose technology as a key focus for the Canadian federal authorities coming out of our budget and the upcoming defense industrial strategy. So we know this is just to the start of the conversation of what's still to come. Powerful. Well, thank you so much again, Jatinder. Beyond appreciated. This is the start to the conversation, and we're excited to hear the continued updates from you and the team in the near future. But in the interim, we look forward to future conversations with yourself. So thank you once again, and we'll definitely follow up soon.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. So lastly, we're going to conclude with our NAV Canada segment led by Alan Chapman for our quarterly updates from our ANSP. So Alan, thank you so much again for being here. I know we have a special guest as well from Patrick Annette. So the stage is yours, Alan, to continue on from the NAV Canada segment.
That's fantastic. Thank you, JR. Appreciate, as always, CAAM putting this forum together and giving us the opportunity to keep industry updated on things that we're all working on. Great presentation from Jatinder as well. Just to point out, and a great segue, the slide that I'm about to share has a picture actually in the center of, let me share this right now, of that drone challenge that was held last week in Ottawa. So again, I'll touch on that a little bit at the end of the presentation, but there's lots of activity underway right now on this. So as we get into the agenda for today, we're going to be talking about the new entrant space again from the ANSP perspective. I shared this slide in particular because this was a slide that was presented by our Chief Operating Officer recently, NAV Canada. And it shows really the three top priorities that NAV Canada has as we look forward strategically. TBO is all about, supporting our traditional aviation business and giving them more flexibility on how they conduct flights, which has a big economic and societal impact from that side of things. Trajectory-based operations. The third one here is DAT, which is all about digital towers and new capabilities to give the ANSP more flexibility and capability to support aviation. And in the center of these two is the new entrant space. So Pat and I today will be talking to you about a couple of aspects of this new entrant space. I'll do some of the discussion around RPAS, particularly the low-level stuff and how we're moving forward with that. To bridge back to Jatinder's presentation, I'll talk a little bit about drone incident management and just color in a little bit about some of the aspects he shared on that. But then the really exciting stuff today, the space will be shared by Pat later in the presentation. So we'll get on to that. From an RPAS perspective, I think everyone's aware of this. It's worth recapping. It's all about how we integrate both small and large RPAS flying, a high volume of those things flying at the low level, and also integrating IFR integrated aircraft, into the high levels of airspace. Supporting all of that, we have strategies for both the RPAS side and urban air mobility as part of the AAM. And we're working closely on all of that with Transport Canada, as you can imagine. So all of that is moving forward, and I'll touch on a couple of those areas today in a little more detail. So from an RPAS operations perspective, we really break this down into the sort of four main areas. Advanced air mobility, as we look to the future of this, how both across my group in NAV Canada, which is all about the remotely piloted aircraft, PAT, which is part of the standards organization, looking at other forms of evolving aviation as well as this. But all of that kind of comes together under that AAM and to the future of UAM and uncrewed elements of that specifically. We focus on small RPAS operations, and technically that should today be classified as small and medium RPAS operations with the change in the regulations, but basically things that are happening at the low level and how we support the path today and in the future where this goes. As I mentioned, large IFR integrated RPAS operations. We have all the operations going on for things like military. The new platforms are being purchased by our military as a real backbone of the work they're doing. So how do we integrate those? How do we make sure that they work with traditional aviation? And then finally, again, we'll touch on this at the end, but the drone incursion, when the drones aren't where they're meant to be, how do we respond to that in an appropriate way and make sure that we're not putting the supply chain or other things at risk and absolutely not putting safety at risk, which is our primary goal. So short term, what are we doing about this? Well, we continue to update our platform today, NAV Drone. I'll talk about this in a second, and we'll talk about the incident response plans. Longer term, how do we create new capability in the market that allows beyond visual line of sight? So all the things that you hear about today that you want to have happening, whether it's first responders being able to respond in an urban environment near an airport to a threat or a risk, and in doing so save lives of people in society or their officers, etc. Deliveries of different things, medical transfers, all those things, will be supported by new capabilities we're looking to build. And of course, we work with, as I said, TC on that. We also work with TC on these incursion events longer term and the IFR space. So pivoting to NAV Drone, where we are today, our platform that's been in place for a number of years now, and industry makes very good use of this. We continue to see expanded use of NAV Drone with Transport Canada's new regulations that came in on the 4th of November. We updated NAV Drone. It released on the same day with the ability to support operational planning for things like sheltered operations, which again you can do in controlled airspace. So you can request permission to fly sheltered operation controlled airspace. Also the ability to fly with a medium drone. Obviously, as the weights of these drones increase, the concerns around safety increase, so we manage a lot more of those closely from a medium drone perspective, but you can submit those through NAV drones, so it all goes in one place. Extended visual line of sight operations, you can plan those. They're not in controlled airspace, but you can plan those for the tool. Same thing for low risk BV loss. So there are tools and capabilities to support planning those operations, so that NAV drone can be the place you go to for getting all that kind of data when you're in planning mode. We also continue to enhance NAV drone, with a series of user interface enhancements and just kind of responding to operator pilot feedback that we get to enhance the service. And so a very small example of that, you can now, there's a place in the tool where you can kind of go and see both what are the most recent updates and also what are any challenges from a software perspective that we're seeing. So there's places in the tool for that. So again, NAV drone, we continue to update as a primary platform to move forward with. But beyond that, beyond the NAV drone, what that market that serves today, the visual line of sight and existing regulations, we're moving forward to beyond visual line of sight. And we published, actually back in 23 now, concept of operation, I think it was around this time actually in 2023, a concept of operations, again in partnership with Transport Canada, to say this is what we believe the future of RPAS traffic management looks like in Canada. That's available on our blog site, NAV Canada. So worth reading if you haven't seen that yet. We're following through with the implementation activities that we need to do to support that. So including the purchase of the acquisition of software to be at the center of all that puzzle, and carrying on really on ironing out lots of detail, lots of unanswered questions around the specifics of operations and how that works. And we do that with Transport Canada. We do that in conversation with industry as well. Also point out, we've just hired a new ecosystem development transformation lead. So this person, so Graham, has joined the organization. She is going to be focused on really helping us understand industry, understand the service provider space of things, building the frameworks that we'll put in place around those. So as we're building software, putting all the technology together, there's this whole separate work stream of how do we get industry, how do we understand industry's needs, how do we build appropriately for that, and get all of this locked in place so that we can deliver the benefits that we all anticipate from having RPAS operating more frequently on an expanded set of operations. So I'll just wrap up with just mentioning again the safety incident, because this is a real area of focus, I think, globally right now, from all of the conflict stuff we're seeing that's spread into other areas in Europe, that's also also seeing activities like this in other countries. Managing the risk, managing incidents that occur in a way that keeps everyone safe, but also manages it in a reasonable way is very important. And so Jatinder mentioned the drone incursion response plans, or the drone incident response plans. We've been working very closely as part of the stakeholder group on those with TC. Really pleased at the work that TC are doing in this space. I think we've really seen it move forward in the last couple of years. So my thanks to TC for that. And those recent events, as I mentioned earlier, we saw that challenge in downtown Ottawa, near the Parliament buildings. There hasn't been many countries, and in fact, I think as Jatinder pointed, this is the first time that we've seen a sort of challenge like this of drone detection systems happening in an urban area, certainly close to the Parliament building. And I think, again, this shows Canada's focus. It's how progressive it is in, understanding the risk of things and managing them safely. And so it was a great activity that went on. I think a lot of learning around that, but most of all, I think just illustrating the importance that this topic has, drone detection, drone awareness, and our ability to support that and lead forward. So some great aspects of that side of things. So that was my quick update on the RPAS space and the overall advanced air mobility piece. We've got some more events coming up in the next couple of weeks with, the AAM study group and things at ICAO, again, pointing to what JR said right at the top of the meeting about the importance of us staying as a country locked into the global experience and the global advances so that Canada is on that stage and helping define how we move forward. Both I'll be there, as will Pat. So that's a great segue for me to hand over to Pat to introduce STO operations and space transport. Pat, over to you.
Thanks, Alan. And good day, everyone. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. As Alan said, my name is Pat Annetts. I'm the manager of Evolving Aviation Operations. So as Alan said, I work in our ATS standards department and in a group there called the Global ATS Standards Integration. Back that up a little bit. So Global ATS Standards Integration is the outward-facing arm of ATS standards, ensuring that NAV Canada remains at the forefront of innovation and resilience in air traffic services. So we look beyond our current environment to integrate emerging technologies and procedures that shape the future of our operations. So as Alan mentioned, the integration of new entrants and ensuring the system is ready for this evolution that's currently happening is one of NAV Canada's strategic priorities. And so my role kind of revolves around ensuring that we are ready to respond to that demand. We do that through active industry engagement and close coordination with Transport Canada and ICAO, and in order to keep NAV Canada on the precipice of what's next. So ensure that we're aligning internal priorities with global advancements, representing our interests in the development of international standards, and reinforcing NAV Canada's position as an influential leader in the future of air navigation. As in terms of evolving aviation operations, where I sit, so I work closely with Alan's team and the RPAS team, as well as other groups within Transport Canada and ICAO, as well as industry partners like CAAM. So thank you very much to JR and team for having me today, to continue to align these emerging technologies with Canadian airspace and our operational procedures. Just to give you a little bit more context, my role focuses on both the advanced air mobility and RPAS to some extent, although Alan and his team are the SMEs in this area and the subject matter experts. But I also work in space transport operations and higher airspace operations. So if you ever heard of high altitude platform systems, supersonic and hypersonic transport and the advent of those systems, that kind of falls within what we do in global ATS standards integration as well. So Alan, I tried to take control, but it's giving me grief. There we go. Thank you. So when we talk about space transport operations in particular, there are a couple of key roles and responsibilities to define just to ensure that everyone has kind of a common operating picture on how these operations are integrated into Canadian airspace. So we work very closely with Transport Canada as the regulator, and we work with a couple different teams, one in general flight standards, and then within the strategies and emerging technologies team, as I'm sure you're probably aware, they do have a commercial space launch team as well. So we work very closely with both those groups. And from an integration perspective, it's important to understand that they are the authority in authorizing space transport operations, as well as defining the airspace that we as the air traffic service provider protect, and they request the NOTAM for a publication. On the NAV Canada side of the house, we receive those restricted airspace dimensions, we publish the corresponding NOTAMs, develop air traffic flow management mitigations to manage the demand around those operations, and at TC's request, we will also analyze what impact a proposed STO or space transport operation might have and provide some input on what we could do to mitigate and offer some solutions in those domains. Alan, if you wouldn't mind hitting the next one again. So technology is tricky some days. Thank you very much. So looking towards kind of what we've been doing in this last year, and I thought this was just kind of a neat visual to kind of contextualize where we're at from the Canadian perspective. So globally, we're seeing record-breaking activity in the STO domain year after year, especially in the US and in Europe, and we're preparing to see a similar scale and a similar growth in Canada with domestic launch and potentially recovery events. So when I talk about discussing items with the strategies and emerging technologies team and their commercial space launch team, this is really what that discussion revolves around, is what's coming to Canada. Now, to set the stage a little bit, Canadian airspace isn't new to integrating STO operations from other countries. So on the screen there, you'll see some events that originated in the US as well as French Guiana, for example. If you look off the east coast of Canada, there's a series of rectangles that progress kind of from the southwest to the northeast. Those are a series of different launches that had stage reentries or boosters that fell back into Canadian airspace. Those rectangles represent the pieces of airspace that we protected in order to accommodate those events. And the top left side of that image there, that's actually a re-entry event that occurred due to a launch off of by Arianespace out of French Guiana. So space transport operations, they're a very global phenomenon. They're not isolated essentially in where their impacts are. What that means for us is that it's hard to see in the graphic, but if you look at the east coast of Canada, on the peninsula there in St. Lawrence, as well as, I hope my cursor's actually showing up, Canso, Nova Scotia, Nordspace and Maritime Launch are two Canadian proponents that are looking to start scaling domestic capability for launch operations. So we've had a couple of trials now in each of those locations, and we are preparing in coordination with Transport Canada to see more and more of these activities happen. Just as a fun, interesting trivia fact, in case you're bored at some point, those rectangular launches off the East Coast primarily represent a project called Project Kuiper. If you're not familiar with that, it's an Amazon product and a Starlink competitor, where they're launching a satellite constellation of about 3,600 satellites to provide space-based broadband internet services. And so those rectangles represent 4 launches, and we're looking at probably 60 more in the next few years impacting similar airspace. So coordinating those events with domestic events will become just one of the problems we'll have to work through in this domain to ensure, like I said, we can respond to industry request. And on that topic, Alan, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Sorry, I can see, I don't know if it shows up on your screens, but I can see my little head float around when I move the mouse and try and put it in an area that's not distracting. In 2026, for space transport operations, we do have a couple fairly clear areas of focus that we are working on. So first thing, like I said, we coordinate very closely with Transport Canada. As these operations have evolved over the years, that coordination has been refined and improved, but we've discovered recently just ensuring that information comes in consistently in a format that works for everyone and is complete is something that we're working on. So in coordination with Transport Canada, with both domestic and foreign space transport operations proponents, other ANSPs, and our other industry partners, we're really working on refining these coordination practices to ensure that as operations scale and the demand increases, that we've done the baseline work to make this a seamless experience. By doing that, it's also going to require that we enhance our internal processes. So space transport operations, I'll be the first to admit, it's not a well-known phenomenon within NAV Canada. We're doing a lot of work to increase that internal awareness. And previously, a lot of our integration processes were fairly regional. And by that, what I mean is the impacted units and specialties within those flight information regions, they would have awareness and an understanding of what was happening. But that information was kind of decentralized. It was a little bit sporadic. Sometimes we had multiple chains of communication occurring discussing the same events. And so we're really working hard to centralize that flow of information, again, to be able to respond to demand at scale. Finally, we've also been working on something called a Higher Airspace Operations Strategy Guide that encompasses how we will integrate not only space transport operations, but earlier, like I said, high altitude platform systems, the return of supersonic transport, the advent of hypersonic transport systems, all the testing that's required, and including what those demands will place on our system from a communication, a navigation, a surveillance perspective, and how our technologies and procedures will require updates in order to respond to that scale. Thankfully, we're in a position where we can learn from our partners. So the US and the FAA, they're obviously no stranger to STO operations, and they've got some experience and some technology that we can leverage and learn from. Same thing in Europe. And really, again, what this is all for is responding to that the global scale and demand, but ensure that we are not the roadblock when it comes to our domestic partners here in Canada being ready to start their operations. And Alan, you can go to the next slide, but really I think that's it for me. So short and sweet, and hopefully that adds some good context for everyone.
Wonderful. Well, Pat, thank you as always, and to Ellen as well for giving some of that oversight. And just to give that context to our ecosystem, we have significant amount of CAAM members that are playing, yes, in the advanced air mobility space, but sincerely as well in the space sector, looking at the similar autonomy, security and defense, and of course, propulsion technologies that are playing back and forth. And with Transport Canada now expanding to the Strategic Emerging Technologies branch that covers space, AAM, and RPAS, this is a big role of ours to make sure we're coordinating, aligning, and supporting that space development as well. So I think, and I'm just looking through the questions here too as well, Pat, what learnings do you think we can take from the new entrants into our space side that can be greater applied to the work that's going to be coming in the advanced air mobility piece?
I think one thing, and it's a strength that CAAM has, it's a strength that Alan's team has for sure. But in my experience, what we've really learned is the earlier that we're made aware of ideas and operations and different requirements that are going to be placed on the system, the better we're able to start, thinking through all the bits and pieces and kind of aligning all the steps in order to get there in a seamless integration fashion. It's a bumpy road. It's got some up and downs, but like I said, it's all about, from my opinion, it's all about knowledge. And when we can share that kind of common knowledge base, everyone's on the same page, and it makes the solutions a little bit more straightforward.
And I know this is the important piece, and we'd like to ask this to our federal authorities as well, but two-part question to both Alan and Pat. Looking forward, what does success look like for both an RPAS, AAM ecosystem, as well as a space side for our integrated airspace of the future?
Alan, I'll give that one to you first.
That's a great question, JR. How far do you want me to project into the future?
Let's start with near term. We've got some pretty big milestones by 2030, so let's do a more nearer term one.
We do. So where I'd like to be by 2030 is, we'll have a new architecture in place in NAV CANADA to support the low-level RPAS that are supporting more understanding of what's in the airspace, better awareness of ideally all things in flight. Maybe that's a slightly longer goal, but certainly the RPAS that we'll be tracking at that point in time in critical operations. So we'll have advanced the small RPAS space well on the way to beyond visual line of sight activities and increase the number of use cases that industry can execute on and starting to see the benefits of that from a societal perspective. We will be in very good shape with our military partners and have the potential for industry to do more IFR integrated flights. So, where they'd like to get to is the ability to do file and fly. Today, when we do an RPAS flight for an aircraft that isn't certified, it takes us a very long time to do that. We've got to do full airspace impact and all the planning, and that's not going to be acceptable when we have a fleet of aircraft under the military that they want to get up and leverage constantly. So we've got a lot of work to do, but that's another place that we need to see significant benefits. So we anticipate seeing all those at various areas, and also we'll hopefully be starting to see the introduction of eVTOL aircraft coming in, and maybe starting that journey towards remotely piloted eVTOL. Don't think there'll be anything in operation at that point, but we'll have much better line of sight as to where that's going. So that's my high level points. Pat.
No, those are really good. I think Alan's nailed it, especially on the advanced air mobility and the RPAS side. On the higher airspace operations side, that strategy guide that we've been working on is really intended to help us conduct a gap analysis. So as these technologies come to market, understanding exactly where the gaps are in our system and how we can mitigate those to support their integration. An example that we've been discussing, so you may be familiar, NAV Canada is looking to establish a Canadian Network Management Unit, or CNMU, that centralizes kind of air traffic flow management. And so from my perspective, if we look at what the FAA and Eurocontrol have done, adding something like a space desk that has real-time launch and reentry monitoring capabilities that would help us refine the areas in coordination with Transport Canada that we need to protect. And the ultimate goal of that is not only to enable space transport operations, but also reduce the impact to our crewed aviation and our other stakeholders across the industry. So ensuring that it's a harmonized integration, I think really is the long-term goal from my perspective.
And I think the key piece there and what we're trying to communicate towards our ecosystem too, and we're seeing is that the concentric circles of both RPAS operations, advanced air mobility, and now commercial space are intersecting more and more. And it's our responsibility to make sure that that integration is happening, yes, on the federal authority side, but critically with industry partners as well.
Absolutely.
Powerful. Well, Alan and Pat, thank you so much again for taking some time and giving us this insight. We know this is similar to TC and Jatinder, the start of these conversations that we'll continue to build upon, and we'll make sure we support from the industry side going forward.
Fantastic. Thanks again, JR, for giving us the opportunity to talk again today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. So just as we wrap up today, I wanted to express a gratitude to both Alan, Patrick, and of course, Jatinder from Transport Canada for giving us some of the insight. We'll continue to build upon these connections and have Transport Canada and NAV Canada have those consistent updates on some of the relevant topics to our industry. So if you've been thinking, how do you get involved and continue to build upon these conversations and shape the future of advanced air mobility in Canada, we wanted to leave you up on one simple answer. Join CAAM. Becoming the CAAM member connects you directly with the heart of Canada's AAM industry, where that innovation, policy, and of course, operationalization are actively taking shape. And whether you're just a startup, a new entrant, major OEM, utility company, or an airport, there's a place and a voice for you in this ecosystem. We really help to build that membership at CAAM that just isn't symbolic, but it's that strategic play. With a CAAM membership, you continue to gain that access to some of our priority reservations for funding up to 50% for our global trade delegations, having that participative voice in shaping Canada's policy and regulatory strategy for advanced air mobility, and critically, that facilitated networking into a national and international ecosystem of our AAM collaborators. This isn't just about waiting on the sidelines, it's about being at the table and having your voice help shape what comes next. And those are just a few of the highlights. There's even more of the member benefits waiting, and we wanted to make sure that you're looking for funding, access, insights, and exposure and influence across a potential CAAM membership. So you can scan the QR code here right now to explore more and sign up. And of course, we want to help shape the future of flight in Canada with acting as your gateway to this opportunity. So as we wrap up today's session, I want to leave you with another clear goal, and this is just to get involved. If today inspired you, if you want to help shape Canada's AAM future, this is your moment. First, join CAAM. Membership gives you a voice in those national discussions. Second, stay connected. Our town halls are your streamlined source for industry updates, regulatory insights, and the success stories coming from across the ecosystem. And once again, we've got the QR code here, or you can visit our link for our CAAM team that's going to be shared momentarily, as well as our newsletter to receive future updates directly to your inbox. So thank you once again to Transport Canada and NAV Canada and everyone for joining us here today. Whether you're a longtime member, a new partner, or just exploring the AAM space, you are now part of the future of flight in Canada. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow us on social, visit us at canadianaam.com, or drop us a line directly at info@canadianaam.com. On behalf of our CAAM team present today, David, Theo, and myself, thank you for being part of the solution. And until next time, onward and upward together. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.